Hey Bright Spirits. Today we are going to be looking at one of the apps I'm pre-developing in Gemini as a test model for an app I think should exist in real life. And the best way to start with things that should exist is by trying to make them exist. This app that I originally prompted several months ago, which is why it will be fun to revisit it today for the first time and do a little coding into it to see, little vibe coding to see what output changes since the last time I've been on it, which have been at least an update and a half ago. Sidebar. The thing about AI is that the genie is already out the bag. What that comes down to is primordial access to it has already exploded. So individuals who have their own infrastructure and framework already have private data models that's reflecting what's trending and what's current now. And they're constantly updating those models. So if anyone's completely anti-AI, in this scenario, we get rid of all the AI that currently is being manufactured by corporations, there are still enough independent individuals out there, bad actors, as some would put it, or just anarchists or people who want to exploit the system, who would be in a more powerful position. So the issue really isn't, well, should we have AI? The issue in the conversation ongoing, of course, is, well, how should we use it? But more poignantly, the point is, well, who should know how to use it? And I think the answer to that is as many people as possible. Understanding the infrastructure of one of the most life-changing, era-defining technologies that humanity has invented to date seems like it is. I mean, I want to say it's a no-brainer, but I understand how some people don't really engage in this side of reality. But the division between, well, I'm going to enjoy reality with working a job and being entertained by whatever my society produces, and will whatever my society produces inherently affects me working a job and the value of my entertainment. And it's in my best interest to understand, well, what navigates this production, because the output is going to affect me either way. Either I'm going to be entertained by what society produces, or I'm going to be critically affected by what society produces and look for entertainment to mitigate those impacts. And that sucks, because if you look at the current market, if you look at the current atmosphere with entertainment as a whole, cultural zeitgeist, growing up as a black kid in the South Bronx, and then a black kid in Jamaica, Queens, with Native American roots, and listening to more rock music than hip hop, and being more interested in science and the supernatural than current fads and trends. I can go on. So for me, from that background, looking at society, looking at what it exports and looking at what it imports, they take more from the consumer than they give. The fact that we've become consumers more over than individuals, more over than what I like to say bright spirits, because I feel like that's progressive towards, radiating and shining a light on your own individuality and your own abilities. But we're consumers, and it's in your best interest to know, well, what is the mechanism behind production of what we are consuming, and how can you as an individual make whatever we're consuming more healthier and more beneficial. And I mean that metaphorically and literally. So with AI, metaphorically and literally and existentially, it can kind of help you understand how to answer that question for yourself. And that's why individuals have personal models that they've extracted from, the digital infrastructure of society, and try to make it their own, because you realize, well, this is a tool any more people can have access to this than an airplane. When it's been decades, almost 100 years of straight aeronautic innovation. And I don't know many people who've even flown an airplane, a helicopter, or who like flying. And I live by JFK Airport. So it just shows you that we have so much technology within a short amount of time, and yet the access to it, the broader access to it for not only consumption but for innovation, that it kind of like declines a little bit, like we explode with technologies and then the consumption of technology broadens, but the access to how we institute and develop said technologies, that narrows. So that's a little quick tangent about why some people should be pro AI. Another way of saying it, not even saying pro AI, if the genie is out of the bag and the whole scenario of Terminator does come to fruition in some capacity. In science fiction, aren't we rebel fighters who have a scientific team who reprogram captured, fallen, defeated Terminator models? Like, how are they able to reprogram it if not for them having the capacity to understand the technology of, in this scenario, the enemy? It still provides a necessity for you to understand what you're dealing with, what you're working with on a mechanical level. And before we get to that scenario of like we have to fight fire with fire, we should probably understand how to control the flame before it burns us. And I guess that's the end of that random tangent that I'll input somewhere in this video. Okay, and now we are looking at what I call Project Aurora. I want to create an app for tracking news and data and connecting it to larger initiatives, and I want to visually display the feed as auroras over Earth. I am thinking about stories where AI is used to cure cancers, environmental events, and investable events that are pro-humanity, pro-universal health, and basic income. I also want to track science and tech that can improve power generation, alternative power, and food and health upgrades. Now, I lined up a pretty straightforward pro eco human initiatives and outlined a general premise for it to build upon. And I think based on this prompt, it came out with a pretty good baseline template on where we can like expand from. Generative, stories, but it shows you the what if scenario of like where we can go and what we can expand on when building an app for any purpose, but in this scenario for a cause. Now let's try to scroll down. I don't know if it lets me in this window. This might just be the initiatives that it have already, but it allows us to differentiate and just track environment, humanity, and universal basic income, energy, and power. So I like how it categorized it. It simplified it. It has all the initiatives at 10 live in the scenario. And then you have like these core categories: AI, medtech, environment, humanity, and universal basic income, energy, and power. That's pretty fair. If there's anything missing, we can add it later. But right now, let's try to add some more details and see where we get with the output. What's this? This is when I originally, it's been a solid month. This is when I originally created the project. And I do like how it gives you its breakdown on how it's going to start developing, hence what's in the app, hence how it's going to work. So you have a visual breakdown, visual like reference of the text breakdown. The favorite feature, the defining feature, the Aurora visualizer, Every piece of data generates an algorithmic aurora stream using math. These glowing lines sway and dance in real time, colored specifically according to their category. Nice and clean, straightforward. It tells you about the responsive UI, which I think is also a great feature. It intuitively added to the design. Now, I think if you're using the platform on your own and you have the exact same settings as me, you would probably get a different output, because one thing I want to point out is recently, because of my branding being a utility within Gemini, it kind of sticks with, or it kind of leans towards this aesthetic. And I'll show you another example, which is the version 2. If you see it in the previous video, I go a little bit more into detail here. But you see the visual, like the cyan, the deep black. It had developed this branding kit for me based on my colors for the Rover Soul brand. And it kind of has it as a protocol that it institutes as a default in some of these designs. And I like that. I can change that, of course, but it kind of just shows you how it evolves along with your content and your instincts. So it's not thinking as an individual. It's a very complicated algorithm working on your behalf based on the information you feed to the stream. That's your data, that's your business, your writing. It helps code it and help customize it for your day-to-day, which is why I can't get into my favorite part. The daily brief, it does contain personal information because it is looking at emails and notices. And on the day of me recording this is Memorial Day weekend, looking at my calendar off screen, it really gave me a heads up about something I forgot about in my email. And it was kind of important. It was pretty important. Money is important, and there's an opportunity for more financial gain. And I slept on it in the daily brief because of its format and summary. I'm like, oh, let me go right to this and fill out the rest of this information. So, employment. But with that being said, hopefully in the future, I'll go make more daily brief videos. For now, let's continue with the Aurora, the Project Aurora, our Good News Humanity Global Pro Humanity Initiative Tracker. And what are we going to add now? Let's ask Gemini. Let's not even bother thinking. I don't know what all this is. Is it glitching? Let's go ahead and get out of that for a minute and come back. Now I'm thinking like a designer, because I'm looking at the format we have now, and I don't imagine this being an overlay of the Earth itself, but I imagine it being in the same digital 3D representation while still looking like the Matrix. Let's see. Let's see what it gives us. So I'm revisiting after a month, keeping it kind of simple to see where we go from a quick update. A direct update, but a fairly straightforward, give me some texture, so give me some detail in the same aesthetic. Okay, we are back with it in its update. It still does this. This is wild. I don't know what's happening with this. This repetitive phrase, that's really strange. We are live for the first time in a month in this particular file, and this happens sometimes. So I don't know what that means, but let's see what we got with today's update. Okay, we're back. I'm gonna go ahead and reboot the project in a new chat. Maybe because it was an older chat window I haven't opened up in a month, something must have went horribly wrong, because it is not behaving properly or as expected. Now my current prompt is for it to summarize the previous instructions and allow me to start over. And let's see what it gives us. Okay, now we are back with the code summarized and regenerated by Gemini for the Project Aurora app, which will be tracking good technologically progressive news across the world. At least that's the plan. That's the concept. This is what I didn't write this at all. I had a previous prompt, and then I had several follow-up prompts, and then that particular session had issues. So we're starting a new session, but prior to that, we asked it to take what we already have and summarize it into a fresh prompt so we can start over. And let's see where we go from here. Okay, it starts with, I will create the Project Aurora tracker. It will be a single HTML file containing the 3.js visualization, the UI, and the underlying data logic. All right, that sounds understandable. Now, in the previous window, we completely lost the option to preview. It was just code. And I think that must have been a technical glitch with it updating or not updating enough. And that might be a reminder for people using this platform to always, nothing, I mean, similar to refreshing your cookies or erasing them, refreshing your browser. Even with AI, when you're feeding it data, you have to make sure that those data sources are kept up, not corrupted, and are still relevant. And in the case of this file, this particular app was only attempted once, one day when I was just working on it, one weekend, we'll say. And it was a month ago. And in that time, Google has had several updates. And now we are live with a preview. And if you looked at the previous example, you can see some noticeable differences in the size of this panel compared to the original version. However, I can actually zoom in and out. They lost some of the squiggly lines, the auroras that actually showcased over the pinpointed area, but a lot of the textures are different, but I can't really see it. So let's move around and play with what we have to learn if it did a good job. Okay, so I think this might be the last update for this session within Project Aurora. We're going to go with this prompt. Good start. I need a few updates. 1. Auroras over the global points. Color coded based on the initiative. 2. Better visual access to the globe. It's behind the live feed and Project Aurora windows. That basically comes down to the window I'm recording on. I do have it customized for the screen size. I have a wider display, and I don't know what I'm doing sometimes. And that might just be because of the size formatting. So I could have prompted the code to adjust with size based on display settings. Note that because that's a common thing you would want to do when coding or designing across platforms. You want to make sure whatever you're making knows to or has the ability to adjust the scale appropriately. 3. Did I finish 2? 2. Better visual access to the globe is behind the live feed in Project Aurora windows. Perhaps make those panels collapsible. 3. In the live feed, I want to be able to link to the source and associated information. 4. Compare this app with similar apps if applicable and implement core or foundation features that apps in this category typically have in the UI. 4th might be the most important if you're just starting out, because you may not know what you're doing, vibe coding any type of feature for your platform, or if you want to make an app about something you've been dreaming. You might want to just get a standard foundation of what apps in your category look like from a user perspective. and then maybe build from there, because sometimes you can think about the core feature and forget about the interface for that feature. So let's see what we get. Okay, we're back. It's been about 5 to 10 minutes for it to actually implement those changes. Closer to 5, not as long as it took previously. And we're going to go ahead and look at the update. I wanted it to have collapsible windows, and it succeeded. Now, I don't know if they're going to come back. Looking at it live, I don't know where they're at. But let's look at the globe. It didn't add the previous Aurora features that I like from the first version of this. I don't really know where I'm at either right now, globally speaking, but it has a pause function that's going to help reset us. That's going to bring us out. Is that the moon? That'd be kind of cool. So I do like the space aesthetic. I do like the controls. Let's see if we can find our collapsible panels. So even bringing... Okay, it's back with a few seconds, and I'm afraid to collapse them again, but we have to because we have to test it. Still not happy about the auroras being missing over the points of interest, but we're going to work on that. And behold, they collapse and they come back. Unlike before, where I completely lost them into the nuances of space over here, which I don't think has been changed. I still see the little specks, stars out in the distance, which is fun. Nice recentered. You can see Australia over here based on the way the pixels are emulating geography. We are in the middle of the ocean right now, in the middle of nowhere, seemingly. We got some good old South in North America. Let's go ahead and see if we can center this again. And it spins automatically. Let's bring back one panel. We can scroll that. It tells us how many nodes we have active. Nodes are another carryover from the language, the internal language of our projects. I use that term to describe Aurora Soul as an entity, myself as the human, and the AI tool Gemini as the engine and implementator of digital nuances. Nice fancy way of explaining the template within the system. So terms like nodes and Spark and even Aurora are customary across several projects. Let's go ahead and look at the live feed to see if this menu works as instructed. I also wanted to know more about each particular location's origin of the story. Let's see where it takes us. Okay, so when you click on that location marker, it's a quick zoom in to where that particular project is happening. And then if you go back up, look at the link here, it's meant to lead to the original source material. Now, the ocean cleanup is a real project. In the actual app scenario, this link would lead to the ocean cleanup directly about this update from the source. I'm trying to mitigate going through different news sources. I know that's kind of like counterintuitive, but hear me out. The news source is secondary as a follow-up to the actual source. And I would like to connect to the actual source because this as itself is a news utility. And I would expect some of the updates for the app to come from the actual source. Now, in order for me to find sources, I will depend on global and broader news outlets. The more reliable they can become, the more I can integrate them as well, so everyone has their fair share of credits in linking back within the infrastructure of a knowledgeable scientific tech community, or whatever the story is about. Could be scientific, medical. The point is you want to be able to get to the source, both literally seeing where they are in the world and where they are on the web. Once again, these links are not live. They emulate what will be a live function. Not bad. I do want to add the auroras, but I think for next video we will come back to it and try to get to the original version, which is the one that stopped working, unfortunately. Let's see if we can. This was the issue with the original version. This repetitive notice, and we can no longer preview it as well. So that's a bummer, but I do have it on video. It is archived because that might be the last time I see it on this version of the platform. But we will try to get those auroras showcasing the way we had it before, just to make this more dynamic. So in this session, we really didn't get the details I wanted, but we did develop things we needed as far as just understanding and search criteria. Now we're going to get back more into the visual, dynamic, appeasing part of the design and UI. But that's for next video. I hope you've taken away some knowledge, some expertise from my trial and error, some experience. And I wish you the best in your pursuit on developing with AI. Stay bright.